I did a research project in 2015, and it was an ethics board approved research project. And so what I did was I surveyed 141 social service worker students. And in particular, what I did was I focused on students who self-identified as being in recovery from having mental health or addiction problems. And so it was an online survey, and as I said, 141 students responded out of a student body of about 750. So quite a good response rate. And the goal of the research was really to figure out what kinds of barriers these particular students who are in recovery, what kinds of barriers they face in the classroom, in a teaching and learning environment. And what the research confirmed was that 20% of our student body in SSW self-identify as being in recovery. And anecdotally, the faculty tend to think that's a bit of a conservative number, actually. So in terms of the research results, one of the things we found was that doing class presentations was identified as a source of significant stress or anxiety. So 50% of the respondents said that. And then 40% of the respondents identified that doing any kind of group work with classmates was also a cause of stress and anxiety. I think the main learning challenge that came up from the survey was the business of concentration, being able to concentrate during a 3-hour class, particularly on the professor teaching. So concentration came up as an issue and a challenge. And I think that for any faculty at George Brown, one of the takeaways from my research would be that it's safe to assume that you have large numbers of students who not only have learning disabilities, but also have significant issues in terms of mental health and addiction issues that they're in recovery from. And it's going to be, obviously affecting their learning. So one of the questions might be, how can you help? How can we as teachers kind of support these students in particular? And one of the results of the survey said that, as we would expect, that students identified a relationship with the teacher as being an important piece of them reducing their anxiety and succeeding in the classroom. But actually, perhaps more importantly, 61% indicated that having a strong relationship with their peers in the classroom is something that will really help them succeed in the classroom and succeed in their learning. And so the business of the relationship with other students being critical, I think, is something we should focus on and be thinking about what we can do as educators in the classroom to foster connections between students. So that might be, for example, lots of think, pair, share activities. It might be lots of opportunities to meet students all over the classroom, not just the students that they sit beside, so they can feel a kind of connection and a relationship to other students. So learning activities, that might be a thing to think about. What kinds of learning activities would foster connection between students? In the work I do, we often do icebreakers, for example. I recently did one where students were asked to share with a partner a guilty pleasure in terms of a song. And so, sometimes we have these little earworms or these songs that kind of stick in our heads, and maybe they're not the kind of songs that our peer group or our friends would necessarily think we should be proud of. And so it's always good for the faculty member to disclose their own guilty pleasure. In this case, for me, it would be the theme song from Titanic, which I heard in a lounge bar in Shanghai, sung by this little jazz trio. And it always kind of just moved me so much. So that would be an example for me, a guilty pleasure, the theme song from Titanic. And when I do this kind of icebreaker activity, sometimes the students start singing the songs to each other, and it just helps them have a little bit of fun and eases their stress. So I think basically my message would be, assume you have many students in recovery from addictions or mental health in your classroom, and think about learning activities that can help them get connected and get to know each other.